Welcome to the latest episode of First Word of Sport. Recording this on Wednesday morning after England's magnificent 0-0 draw last night. Obviously, very, very hot here in London. Absolutely roasting. How are you, James, this morning?
Hot. It's 30 degrees as we record this, and it's going to get up to 35, 36. Yeah, so London is not built for hot weather or cold weather. Well, as we all know, yeah, all good. I've just about woken up from that ball fest from last night's performance in Boston for England versus Ghana. Kind of predictable, wasn't it, though?
I think it was. I think anytime you get a team who sits back in the way that Ghana did and sort of how clear their intentions were. I mean, we say it in terms of the Premier League all the time. These teams are very well organized. And when a team sits back, in the way that they did, it's very difficult to break them down. And do you know one of my abiding thoughts when watching it last night, James? Anthony Gordon, Barcelona, what we talked about on this podcast, I know you're a massive fan of him, is he cannot play against low blocks. He doesn't have the skill set. And it was shown again last night. He was absolutely terrible. And I just do not know what Barcelona, who are going to have a huge percentage of the ball, and they're going to playing against lots of low blocks. I mean, what are they thinking, honestly?
They've almost bought him, haven't they, on those 3 games they played against him in the Champions League last season. He's got no ability on the ball, skillful wise. He can't beat a player by kicking it 5 yard past him and beat him for pace. Now, that last night, the Ghanaian right back had the same amount of pace as him. I did hear Anthony Barry, the assistant manager to Tuchel, saying, "We're a bit surprised that Ghana defended 12 yards deeper than we were expected." Really? Why are you that surprised that the way to stop England playing, and a majority of top teams to play, is deny them space in behind? As you say, a low block and go, all the games in front of us, you try and beat us down, but break us down. We'll try and defend set pieces, whether that's a corner throw in or free kick, better. And hey presto, England created one chance. I know O'Reilly hit the post with a header or the crossbar and it came out to Kane, and Kane probably did expect Kane to at least hit the target. Not
I do think that's was one thing I would add is that there is always a lot of narratives. I mean, we talk about narratives all the time. Kane scores that chance, which he should have scored, and everyone's saying, "Oh, it was a solid performance from England." I mean, ultimately, this stage of the tournament doesn't really matter. The only thing you really want to do, I think, is top your group so that you potentially have an easier route. You don't really want a tricky last 32 or last 16 game if you can help it.
Yeah, I think England will top the group. They'll beat Panama on Saturday night, 10 o'clock UK time.
Panama were pretty good last night. I mean, they were really unlucky not to get something out of that game.
Against
Um,
Croatia, 1-0
against
overnight to
Croatia.
Croatia.
Croatia looked awful, which makes me wonder about England's first game. But Panama were good value for at least a draw last night.
And the same thing's going to happen on Saturday, isn't it? They'll defend deep and try and deny space. The issue I have with Tuchel's squad, and we said it actually whenever we did the pod in February, March, when talking about players who should go. He has a plan A, which is very regimented. We know what it is. The 2 midfielders, well, it's actually one in recent. It's been Anderson and Declan Rice has been playing quite high up. The 2 wingers and Bellingham close to Kane. Plan B is just to do plan A better with different players. There's no difference on the bench. When you bring on Saka, okay, he's a huge upgrade on Madueke, who was bang average again yesterday, and then Rashford for Gordon, and then Rodgers for Bellingham, and then if Tony or Watkins, I mean, Tony's more probably similar to Kane than we actually know than Watkins is. But my point is that they're very similar. There's no change in play at all. There's no way that we can go actually get the ball on the deck and start prompting and promoting as well. And that's why Adam Wharton should have gone. Because at least he's got the ability to play those balls right foot, left foot. That Declan Rice and Elliot Anderson don't have that ability. They're not the type of player. I'm not calling them bad players. I'm just saying they're very similar players. And you probably don't need both of them in a games like against Ghana. And from right back, there was a certain occasion last night where having Trent Alexander-Arnold come on for the last 25 minutes to cross the ball in or play a pass from wherever it is into space that he used to do for Mo Salah at Liverpool would have been ideal. And not having a left-back, natural left-back, in starting that game for Jed Spence. Jed Spence is out of his depths at this level. He's not an international footballer, and he shouldn't be starting, not in a must-win game, obviously, but Lewis Hall must be thinking, why am I sitting at home on holiday kind of thing?
So I think there's quite a lot to sort of unpack there. So I think the Lewis Hall one is, I've said I think Lewis Hall's, as good as any left back in in the Premier League. Let's put it that way. And I was shocked that he didn't not only didn't make the squad, but isn't starting. I know Nick O'Reilly. I'm still not convinced that Nick O'Reilly's best at left back. I don't quite know. But you can't be starting Spence as your left back when when you had the option to take the likes of Hall, and it's just such a massive downgrade. I'll tell you what Spence is. Spence is an incredible athlete who, if you wanted a player to man mark a player, right, he has the physical attributes to take a player, or not out of a game, but go a long way to make him. He's not going to be beaten for pace on the outside, or there's certain jobs that Spence can do. But what he isn't good at, or isn't good enough at, is when you actually have to be creative from that left back role. Is he just doesn't add that much to the party at all, and I think that's part of the problem.
Yeah, I agree with you. I just don't like having, when you're against a low block, I don't like not having a left back who's left footed to go on the overlap outside the left wing or whoever it may be. And the one time in the second half where England actually moved the ball quickly, because Spence was high up and wide and Gordon had an option on the left-hand side, someone outside him. The only time in the entire game that they moved the ball quickly. It was just a very mundane, as I said earlier, the first thing, predictable. Teams know how to play against England.
So a couple of other things. Madueke, I mean, I mean, he's just not close to being good enough. He did nothing at Arsenal all year. He was really picked in this squad on the basis of some performances in games for England in terms of warm-up games and things like that against some pretty mediocre opposition. I can't believe the sooner Saka is back actually fit, it's going to be a big upgrade for England. I mean, I think really missing Saka because Madueke isn't the answer. I think right. Let's talk Anderson and Rice because you touched on it there. You can't have both those. You can't have those two in central midfield when you're trying to break down a low block. We've touched on both players individually previously, on this podcast, and one of the things that you touched on Wharton there. One of the problems with both of them is they don't offer enough going forward in terms of the quality of their passing. If you're Ghana, you're quite happy to sit there in a low block, and you're not worried about like the quality of England's passing in that central area. Everything is so slow and pedestrian.
Yeah, they're good footballers, as I said. Don't get me
And I'll
wrong.
tell you what, they're not. By the way, they're not 120. I don't know who Manchester City think they're getting. For 120 million pounds, but
Yeah, they don't
yeah.
set the tempo of the game. They don't move it here. You watch the likes of Pedro and Gavin, even Frankie de Jong for Barcelona and the Netherlands, for example. They don't probe, give it here 5 yards, move it, give it another 5 yards. It's literally just moving it on to another centre-back or go and get it off a centre-back, a traditional old England midfielder, and it really winds me up. And they can get back into a system, as you say. These players are very well coached now, and they understand it. They can just match us physically as well, a lot of these players. And it proved like once you get in that system, it's very hard to break them down. But yeah, it's just penny for not picking Rio and Gamera or someone like that. But look, it's not the end of the world. That's like it was a clean sheet. Ghana did absolutely nothing going forward, although
England were lucky, really
it
lucky
was
twice
two.
yesterday. Like
Yeah,
Pickford again, he's an absolute liability at times. He was lucky, and then you know it was obvious at the time. I still don't quite know what's happened, but Konza didn't get the ball and took the player out. He's very, very fortunate that that wasn't a penalty.
It's a stone wall penalty. If that's the other end on Kane and one of their lads is taking him out, then you'd be absolutely shouting from the rooftops. It was a clear penalty. And Pickford, by the way, that's a 50-50. Another referee another day is sending Pickford off there. He comes out. I don't understand how he gave the foul on Pickford. I know people are saying he left his leg in the forward, but it's a 50-50. He was lucky not to be sent off for that. Jordan Pickford's just what he is. He tries and makes it like he's coming out to be good and doing something. You're just like, you don't need to be there. He didn't need to be there at all. Like, and he got extremely lucky. I think Konsa's a penalty all day.
I think, look, I've talked about Konza before. I think he's one of the more overrated centre backs around generally. I think one of the things you'll see with England actually is people always talk about him as like a Rolls Royce of a defender and things like this. But one thing he's not good enough at is with the ball at his feet. So when you look at Villa, when Villa are at their best is when Pau Torres has the ball in terms of his insightful passing from the back. When it's Konza is being the one asked to do the passing, it's just not good enough. It's not elite. And you're seeing that a little bit for England. So what you'll see in these games is it'll be, Pickford will go to a Stones or a Konza, and then it's sideways, and then it's just a pass out to the right back. It's just you're not seeing a ball up to Bellingham, through the lines up to Bellingham, where Bellingham can actually turn in space and then sort of attack the Ghana defence. You're just not seeing those sorts of passes from the centre backs because they're not good enough.
And then, as you say, you pass into Anderson and Rice, and they're not good enough. Well, they are good enough, but they don't do it that
No, they're
often.
not. They're not good enough. They are not good. They are not elite at passing.
That's the word. They're not elite. They're not top level where they can, as you said, spray a ball 10, 15 yards at pace, one touch into Bellingham's feet or Saka's feet, and then off you go. You got the opposition slightly out of position, then you can go on, kind of thing. And then I heard Harry Kane saying last night, I was man marked by Thomas Partey. Last time I Thomas Partey was a defensive midfielder.
Well, I mean, what's one problem Kane has sometimes is he does come too deep. But actually, last night it didn't seem to be the case that he was coming that deep.
Yeah, I
Um,
thought it was a strange comment from Kane last
I,
night.
I,
Maybe
do-
it's
I,
just one of those where straight after the game and his emotions all over the place kind of thing, and he knows he's missed a big chance of the game, but I don't think he was man marked by Thomas Partey. He was good last night, by the way, Partey.
I do think that what you were touching on is Bellingham actually playing in central midfield would add an extra dimension, I think, going forward. To either play Rice or Anderson with Bellingham in the middle, it doesn't have to be Rodgers further forward, but you need something more when you're getting so little out your wide players as well. I don't know. It's just so boring. I mean, there's no coincidence, James, that at one point yesterday, I think I saw someone say that if Rodgers does end up at Arsenal, they would have had the Arsenal midfield five yesterday. So you'd have had Eze, Madueke, Rice, Rodgers, and Saka all on the pitch at the same time. Little wonder those backwards passes, sideways passes, there for everyone to see.
No comment, Your Honour.
But anyway, I think that's probably enough about England. I mean, there's no big dramas, but just not quite sure the balance of the squad is quite right. And there's quite a few average players in this England squad.
Yeah, they need an early goal against Panama on Saturday night just to settle themselves down and settle the fans inside the stadium. They're miles away. These stadiums, if you haven't seen or watched American sport, they are fantastic, but they are quite a long way from the pitch and not pitch level, a lot of them kind of thing. But yeah, just for their own sense and their own security for England players, an early goal would do wonders for their confidence on Saturday, just to get this mindset on the front foot again. And they should be going into that game and win that game comfortably. But as we've seen, there are upsets in this World Cup.
So elsewhere, I mean, I guess so. One thing, so we got the final round of group stages, they start tonight, including Scotland, Brazil. I was looking earlier. I need to spend a little bit more time looking at it, but there is a possibility Scotland could get through with one of those third place spots with 3 points. Originally, I thought that they would probably have to get to four, given their goal difference wasn't very good. But I think they've had some pretty favourable results elsewhere in terms of what might be required to get out of the groups. Um, I, I think the World Cup generally has been about the big name strikers. So obviously we had Ronaldo last night scoring another couple. Mbappe can't stop scoring. Um, yeah, it feels like obviously Messi added another couple earlier in the week. I think the other big takeaway I'd have, apart from just the big strikers, is just the quality of the goalkeeping. It has been absolutely horrendous this tournament.
There's a dearth of top-class goalkeepers in the world, though, isn't there, really? There is a dearth of top. Right, Donnarumma is obviously not here with Italy, but we know that Alisson is way, way past his best for Brazil and Liverpool. There's not many top-class keepers around. And I know I've heard all this media. There's been some sort of media narrative that the ball's made a difference and all this business. Maybe it's just because the keepers aren't that good at the moment. They're just not that good.
Well, I would look at it slightly differently to that. I think the expectation for keepers has never been higher, right? You're expected to be great with the ball at your feet. You're expected to be able to, dominate set pieces. You're expected to be a great shot stopper. You're expected to do everything. Okay. Whereas even when you look back traditionally at goalkeepers, a lot of them had certain weaknesses, and nowadays they're expected to be, all the standard of goalkeeping now is higher than it's ever been. But I do think that one of the problems you have with these poor teams is with that comes some pretty poor goalkeepers. And I think that the issue of the balls is a bit of a myth because a lot of the errors have been like playing out the back and just stuff that they should be saving. Um, and the players you only have to see one thing you see now is you see these stats come up with how fast the ball is traveling and all this sort of stuff. And we saw a goal last night. It was the free kick that um, Nunes scored for Portugal. And I don't know if you saw the angle from behind the goal. So the view that basically that the goalkeeper had. And I know everyone was expecting Ronaldo to hit it. And obviously Nunes has struck it. And I think what it makes you realise is literally just how little time, goalkeepers have in those sorts of situations. That it is an utterly thankless task. The ball was travelling so fast, but it still doesn't legislate for a lot of terrible goalkeeping.
Glad Portugal didn't allow Ronaldo to take a free kick because he's one of the worst free kick takers statistically ever going, kind of thing. I'm back Ronaldo. I'm back Ronaldo. First goal's a really good finish, and the second goal's a good finish as well, to be fair to him. Portugal winning nothing, as I said last week, playing with 10 men. They're just not. And Martinez has got no backbone, spine that's not dropping him. Don't care he scored a goal last night or two. It's all about me, me, me. Not a fan of Cristiano Ronaldo, as people can probably tell.
Well, I think one of the interesting things with Portugal is that they've obviously got Austin McPhee, who's Villa's set piece coach, as their coach, and they obviously scored a couple of times yesterday from set pieces. And I do think it could well play a big. Obviously Arsenal had great success with set pieces. It does feel like some of these smaller countries don't spend the amount of time needed on set pieces. And it does feel like these bigger teams who have the correct sort of infrastructure and structure will have a pretty significant advantage at times. When you've got some of the best set piece coaches in the world for your, national teams. And I think for teams like England, England is so dangerous at set pieces.
Maybe these new interpretations of the laws where you can't grapple and rugby tackle has changed the way they're looking at them because you can block. You used to be able to block, couldn't you? And things like that. And you could put it, especially what certain clubs did. And now it's almost gone back to where it should be, and there's no grappling European football kind of thing or European, Champions League, Europa League kind of thing where you're not allowed to do it. There are less goals from it. So, yeah, I mean, that's England's big strengths. But I'm looking at games tonight. I'm looking at Scotland, Brazil. Brazil being absolutely terrible. Like, their fullbacks are just. Wesley is a massive miss, injured earlier, didn't actually get into the tournament. Danilo's 35 going on 55 kind of thing. Rafinha, there's question marks about him, or I'm looking forward to seeing Ryan, the Bournemouth youngster, playing tonight. He might be starting tonight, but they look bang average.
But they've got bang average. We touched
They've
on
got
this in
bang
the
average. It's the worst Brazil team
right.
in my lifetime. They used to have great players growing up, kind of thing.
But I said that in the podcast before when we looked at this tournament, is when you got players like Paqueta, Paqueta, we saw West Ham improve drastically when Paqueta left to go back to Brazil. His attitude sucks. It's absolutely horrendous. You have so many absolute show ponies in those central areas as well. There's a lot of decent players, but they're not great players. And I'm intrigued to see whether Scotland can actually turn up and get a result tonight.
Scotland lack a goal scorer, don't they? Apart from McTominay from midfield-ish, but Shea Adams is what he is, championship striker, things like. I know he's at Torino, isn't he? I think he'd want to come back to the championship. But yeah, I think Scotland can get a result. I don't think they were great on Friday night, Scotland, but conceding a very early goal against Morocco, you kind of thought your whole game plan goes out the window kind of thing a little bit when you concede it that early into the game. Look, they can cause, they'll cause Brazil big trouble tonight if McGinn and Gann and Doak on the right-hand side up against the Brazil left-back Sandro or something like that. Get him the ball and let him run at him for 65, 70 minutes kind of thing. Like, he's proven he can beat players kind of thing. So that's Scotland's attitude to get. And get McGinn closer to McTominay. Don't start him playing periphery out on the left again.
I think Scotland will. So I think Morocco are pretty useful. You're not a bad team. When you look at some of these African teams, I think Morocco is certainly, one of the better ones. I think Scotland were a little bit unlucky in the end against Morocco. I know you, John, and myself have different opinions on this, but I actually think that was a penalty on McGinn. I know you don't agree. That's fine. That's what football's all about. It's about opinions. At the end of the day, is McGinn not going down, or he's not looking for the penalty, is the player hasn't made contact with the ball, and he's hit McGinn quite hard in the sort of hip area. And, I don't... Look, we'll agree to disagree, but I actually think it probably was... I think Scotland were probably slightly unfortunate with that one. Let's put it this way, if it gets given, it's not being overturned.
Yeah, it wouldn't have been overturned, no.
Anything else that sort of stands out you've seen this tournament so far?
The Dutch had a very good win on Saturday afternoon, early evening against poor Sweden. That's probably the most entertaining game of the World Cup so far in terms of goals kind of thing. No, not really. I mean, there's a bit of posturing at the moment, isn't it? There's no jeopardy, as we say, because you can finish second and third. And because it's been diluted with so many teams, the big teams, there's no... everyone was getting their knickers in a twist about Spain drawing their first game. It's utterly irrelevant. Even if they lost their first game, it was utterly irrelevant. They're still going to qualify. I think teams like that, they're almost just getting through to the knockout, the last 32 at the moment, some teams kind of thing. They just don't need to run at full pace. They don't need to always... And at the end of the day, right, you can't always play at your best all the time. It's like you don't need to play well now. You need to play well in 3 weeks' time when it's at quarterfinals, semi-finals and final if you get that far. You don't need to show your hand now. Everyone knows roughly as well how teams are going to play. There's no real change. There's not really a thing where I go, oh, that's different. And maybe France, you look at it, they've slightly changed it after the second half. They put Elise in behind Mbappe and Dembele off the right. But they are moving all over the place, those four kind of things. There's not really... they're rigid in that position. There's not... I don't look at it and go, whatever. Argentina are going to be hard to beat. If they go ahead, they are extremely hard to break down.
I,
And they have to go. They have the best player in my lifetime. I've never seen or seen Maradona count as probably up there with him. Never saw a Cruyff really. But when you have someone like that who's full of confidence as well, he can score out of nothing, and teams are scared of him still at the age of 39. I think it's his birthday today, Lionel Messi's birthday today. But Argentina, if they go ahead, and they've what? Well, won the last World Cup, but won back-to-back Copa Americas, I think, as well, haven't they? So they're on a ridiculous streak as well.
well, I think what's amazing is if you look at how many clean sheets they've had. I know in terms of Emi Martinez, the number of clean sheets he's had for Argentina is absolutely insane. I mean, there's plenty of those where he hasn't had to do huge amounts and stuff like that. But, defensively, they are so, so solid. And as you say, I mean, I said it in chat yesterday to you, was that when this Argentina team goes ahead, it's so difficult to get back in and, and break them down. I mean, one thing that was interesting, Romero looked like he may have tweaked a hamstring, actually, which, I mean, it didn't look serious because he carried on, but he did eventually come off maybe 5 minutes later. So someone like him would be a big loss. Whether you like him or not, he's been a huge part of the success defensively for this Argentinian team. And it's interesting, Argentina are now shorter in the betting than England are.
Yeah, so they have won back-to-back Copa Americas. 2021, they beat Brazil, and they beat Colombia in 2024 in Miami, actually, after extra time. That was Nicolas Otamendi, the ex-Man City player. Pace of Benfica, I believe, came on for him last night, didn't they,
And
Romero?
he's retiring at the end of the tournament.
Yeah, I listened to Champions League and I heard that, and so what was he, 35, 36? I mean, they don't play Jordan till the small hours of Sunday morning, UK time, 3 o'clock. So, have they already won their group, haven't they, Argentina, I'd imagine, kind of thing. So, but yeah, they have been the most impressive team, I think. Just to think how they can find whatever, but
I haven't been that impressed.
Julian Alvarez hasn't started yet, kind of thing.
I
So when
haven't
he gets up to full fitness and things like that,
I haven't been impressed by France. So even if you look at the game, I'm losing track. This World Cup schedule is absolutely nuts. I'm exhausted. Uh, but if you watched France, obviously in the game that got delayed, um, was it against Iraq or was it Iraq? I think it was.
Iraq, yeah, yeah.
Um, Mbappe scored a great goal, and then the other two goals were defensive howlers. Against Senegal, France weren't very good for the best part of an hour. They have all these amazing star names up front, but one thing we touched on in that pod before the tournament was the lack of balance a little bit throughout that team. And I definitely see central midfield as being weaker than some teams, I think.
Yeah, and they've got an interesting game on Friday evening. They play Norway. And I know a lot of people tip Norway or as an outside and price had moved and etc. But when you have someone like Erling Haaland, who can, this ability he's got just to put the ball in the back of the net is scary. His second goal, not yesterday, I think it was Monday, whenever it was, when he's kind of not even looking at the cross, suddenly gets his position facing a goal to get his right foot up that quickly underside the crossbar. It's genius. Like, it's unbelievable how he's just a lot of the time in the right place, right time, puts it away. I know people are saying whatever, but when you have someone like that who can just score out of absolutely nothing, they're a dangerous side, kind of thing. So that will be a game to actually watch on
I
Friday night
think
UK time,
y-
Norway France, just to get an idea, because it'll be a test for France, because Norway are playing half decently, kind of thing.
I think Norway's problem is defensively. They look
Yeah.
pretty suspect, and But as you say, I mean, I always think Haaland, the way Man City play, is a bit wasted. I always remember, when he was at Dortmund, where he was able to actually use his pace and things like that a lot more, his all-round game, whereas at City, he's just become this unbelievable finisher almost. You do see glimpses occasionally of just he's just a bit of a monster, really. His power, his strength, his finishing. It's just, yeah, I mean, it's just elite.
I think a lot of that is the way when he was at Dortmund. Obviously, Dortmund aren't anywhere near as good as Man City, so games were opened up, kind of thing. And he could use his pace and power. When you play Man City, 95% of the teams that play against them will do that low block, and there's no space in behind them. But when the game does open up, you see him and he's in full stride. He's a handful, absolute handful.
Well, he's more than a handful. I mean, you wouldn't pick any other striker in world football ahead of him. And I know Mbappe's turned up at this tournament, but one thing I did see actually, what was quite interesting was one of the problems France has got is with Mbappe is when he plays that central role up front is given how little he actually contributes apart from. I know it sounds stupid, apart from scoring goals, he's not great at linking play up, and actually the amount of chances France create when he plays up front isn't brilliant. The actual numbers are really poor relatively, given their attacking output. So I think it's something to watch to see whether we might see him shift out. You could see him shift out wider to the left. They can bring Dembele up into that 9 role. Who knows what they're going to do? I mean, they have so many options. But Mbappe as that main striker isn't always the answer you think it might be, even when, he's obviously had some brilliant finishes. So it's difficult to be too critical, but he's not brilliant at linking up play and bringing others into it.
Yeah, and they've moved Dembele off to the right, haven't they? Almost, you could put Mbappe off the left, Dembele as the central point. You play Elise off the right, or you do play Elise off the right, and then whoever you're playing behind him, Cherki, Dure, whoever you want. I think
Well,
Barcola
you
won't
can, well,
play
you
there,
can play
but
Elise. You can play Elise in the middle behind, and then like he has done a couple of times, and then Doué off the right.
yeah, they've got options, but they've
So
got goals in that team, a lot of goals.
any other? So by the way, the refereeing continues as a general rule. I quite like it. I love things like the throw-ins and all the little tweaks they made in terms of to stop the time wasting. Um, Only thing I would say is, we get so used to VAR, certainly in the Premier League, overturning decisions. There's been a few decisions I've seen now which um, we go, really? That could easily have been something more consequential. Obviously not just the Konza one yesterday. Um, I can't remember who it was now. There was a tackle the other day where it's straight down the calf of a player, and you could see. I can't think who it was. You could see on his socks. You could see just the stud mark straight down his calf. And if a red card had been given for it, you go fine. How can you couldn't complain about it? And it's that sort of stuff that I just wonder if we might see as things get a bit more serious. It's just that lack of consistency a little bit in terms of decision making.
Almost go back to the first game Argentina played when Messi could have been sent off for that. I didn't see the incident. I was actually away in Galway over the weekend. So, yeah.
Another one of your trips away, James. Um, all right, that's enough World Cup for now. Let's touch on some transfer news. In the summer months, it's always going to be topic of hot conversation, and I do want to start just talking about Morgan Rogers. And there's been so much chat about him going to Arsenal, and I think there's a huge chance that he will go to Arsenal. I feel it's been on the cards. Originally I think Chelsea might well have been in for him. But Chelsea without Champions League and with the financial restrictions they're under makes it that much harder deal to make. The levels of arrogance and just utter I can't begin to describe it from Arsenal fans on Twitter. They are utterly insufferable, and they wonder why everyone honestly hates them and wants them to not succeed. It's you have to read the comments to believe them, honestly. But irrespective of that, I think there's a very high chance that Rodgers will go. But one of the things you see with the Arsenal fans is oh, we're not paying more than £80 million for him. Well, hold on. You just have to look at last night when you see Gordon at 70, you see Anderson being touted for 120. Given that Middlesbrough have got a 20% sell-on clause, Villa aren't selling Rodgers for £80 million. I don't. It just isn't happening. Um, Villa would get what 64 million or whatever, and what can you buy for £64 million in this market? Not a lot. So I think there has to be a level of realism in there. One of my favourite moments this transfer window so far was Ben Jacobs um, was talking about Manchester City having a sell-on clause on Morgan Rogers, which I believe is technically not even allowed. Just gives you an idea as to what some of these journalists are like. I know you're a big fan of his as well, James.
Yeah, there's another pod I listened to, one of the podcasters, producers calls him Danger Ben, which is quite apt, actually. Yeah, look, Morgan Rogers is a good player. Just come off a great season at Aston Villa, obviously. So he's 23. He hasn't actually played that much Premier League football. He's only played, 18 months of Premier League football kind of thing?
He's
He bought
basically, yeah. So he came to Villa in the January transfer window, and he's not. Before that, you got to remember he had what, a short period of success at
at
Middlesbrough,
Middlesbrough. Yeah.
right? So what you find is Emery has done an unbelievable job on him in terms of helping to make him the player that he is. And by the way, I think that if you're spending £100+ million on him, you're going to be a bit disappointed because I'm not sure he's quite the player that people think he is. He has some amazing moments, don't get me wrong. And, you know, I'd have no confidence in Arteta being able to get as much out of him as Emery has. We see likes of Eze go to Arsenal and it's absolutely useless. Eze is a seriously talented footballer. Like, he's utterly wasted at Arsenal under Arteta. We've said this so many times. What players at Arsenal, apart from your hugely talented youngsters like your Sakas of the world, which youngsters or which players at Arsenal have improved under Arteta?
Quite hard to unpick. Look, Morgan Rogers in today's day and climate is a £120 million player. If you're talking Elliot Anderson for 120, Adam Wharton for 100, Matheus Fernandes for £80 million, Alex Scott for 65, 70, Morgan Rogers, who has just had an unbelievable season, puts the ball in the back of the net. And if you're paying that big money, the hardest thing in football is to score goals. Goals equals points. You score 80 goals in the Premier League in the course of a season, you're likely to get around 75 to 80 points. Go and look at the past history of title-winning teams. You score that many goals, 80 goals, you get 80 points kind of thing. It's what happens kind of thing. Where would he play for Arsenal as well? So he's not
Well,
going
I
to play
think
he's not going to play behind the striker Gyökeres or Havertz. I don't think he could play with Havertz at all because they occupy the same place. So you play him off the left, which isn't his best position, right? Arsenal. Then he always comes inside. You've got Eze there, by the way. He should be playing off there if you really want him. That you spent £65 million this time last summer, almost despite Tottenham. That sounds like kind of thing. And I just wouldn't have any confidence in, as you say, Arsenal improving players. Saka hasn't really improved. Martinelli certainly hasn't improved from what he was when they bought him.
regressed
Declan Rice,
massively.
yeah. But Zubimendi fell off a cliff last season. That's probably due to the amount of football he's been played. I look at Morgan Rogers as an individual and thinking, where else would he go, though? That's the thing. And why would he leave Aston Villa at the moment? Why wouldn't you say to Aston Villa, okay, I'll give you one more season and see where we end up, kind of thing? If they're not prepared to pay £120 million, you say to him, look, we're in the Champions League. We do have a very good, solid structure now being in Champions League for the next 2, 3, 4 years because there's 5 places kind of thing. We've got one of the top 3 managers in the Premier League, if not top 2 managers in the Premier League.
Whoa,
We're played in
whoa,
Champions League.
whoa! Top two? Who's top?
Well, they're going to argue Arteta, aren't they? But I know. Okay, I'm just saying.
No. I was just intrigued. If Pep had been in the conversation,
Yeah,
I can take that, James. I am not having Arteta ahead of Emery at this point in their careers. Get out of here with that
just
absolute
being
nonsense.
just being some political PC. But anyway, we're just interested to know why Morgan Rogers go to Arsenal, kind of thing. Would it to be win titles? But are Arsenal going to be a dynasty? I don't think they're going to be a dynasty at all. I wouldn't have any confidence in Arteta getting over the line if Man City get away with their charges and Liverpool get their act together and Chelsea get their act together. And not worried about United under Carrick. Carrick needs to go. But yeah, it's just an interesting one, though.
So one thing that was interesting is that so a couple of things to this. One is from a Villa perspective, right? Is him leaving isn't like when Grealish left, right? When Grealish left, it felt like the end of the world. Like you had this generational type player who was just incredible week in, week out, and was performing with a level of consistency. And you got to remember at that time, the 100 million that Man City spent, you know, it feels like quite a bit more than 100 million pounds does today in terms of what 100 million pounds gets you. Um, Rodgers isn't near to that, in my opinion. Like he's inconsistent as well. But anyway, but one player Villa is it was one player that Villa have been linked with that is interesting is Jared Bowen. Now, there's talk about a 50 million pound transfer fee, and West Ham can dream all they want. But I think he's 30 in December. But Villa do desperately need someone on that right side of midfield, and Bowen would tick so many boxes in terms of that position that the transfer would make a lot of sense if that transfer fee makes a bit more sense. If that makes sense, the problem you have is a 50 million pound transfer fee, and then even wages of say, 150 grand a week. What's that? 30 million pounds over 4 years. There's no way Villa are committing 80 million pounds to Bowen at the age of 30 in December with no resale value. But if that it depends how desperate West Ham are in terms of to get rid of him. But honestly, he would make a lot of sense for Villa where they are.
At £20 million, yes. Because of the, as you say, the wages and 4-year contract, which he'd want to move his family up from London up to Birmingham kind of thing. But he's 33. The problem is, he's 33. If he's 25, then absolutely, because you could sell him on in 2-3 years' time. You wouldn't care. But this is his
But,
last big contract, so he wants a big contract.
but
But yeah,
okay, so
he's a
go
good
on.
player.
But I think that's the point in terms of West Ham. It's gone too far now into his age to be able to command a crazy fee, I think. And his dad's an Aston Villa fan, James. So there you go.
Really? He's from.
He's
Well,
he's a man of he's a man of great taste. Um, One other thing I did see on social media, I hate to keep going back to social media, but Villa have obviously been linked with Emerson Royal as a backup right back to Matty Cash, and let's talk about 8-9 million euros or whatever. And it makes me laugh because you get loads of Arsenal fans go, "Oh, what? It's a little wonder Villa have PSR issues when they're spending that sort of money on that type of player." And you're going, "Well, hold on, you're missing the point a little bit with this. Is it's because of the PSR restrictions that they're actually having to buy this sort of player. I don't want him anywhere near Aston Villa. He's not. Everything I saw when he was at Tottenham would suggest he isn't good enough. But it's because of all the restrictions that are in place that you're having to be linked with these sorts of players. And I don't know, it just feels a little bit rich, that Arsenal fans, for example, come along and start criticising clubs who aren't burdened in the same way that Villa are at the moment from a financial perspective.
forget the player for a second. Aston Villa need a right back who can take minutes off Matty Cash's load,
Yeah.
especially being in Champions League. So you play him against the likes of Coventry, Hull, Ipswich, the rubbish in the Premier League. Any other FA Cup, any other League Cup games you play, it's just about taking minutes off your starters. And he's a backup. You don't want to spend big money on a right backup because One, there actually isn't that many right backs going around anyway. And two, they're not going to play that often unless there's an injury or, okay, whatever. But you need two players in their position. And that is a position Aston Villa struggled last season. They played Lindelof there at times. They played Bogard there at times.
Well,
Just want a
Gar-
natural right back who will play 10 games a season and will get 700 to 1,000 minutes. Job done. Matty Cash can have a week's off here. You play a week side in the Champions League at home. You play whoever it is, and you can play him in, and you know you're going to win the game because you're what a huge favourites. You're 10s on to beat whoever at home, kind of thing, at Djurgårdens or whoever it is in Sweden, whatever. Just take minutes off to first choice. It's no harm in the signing, kind of thing. Low wages. What's he going to be on? 50 grand a week,
I suspect
100.
higher than that, but then one of the
But
problems is they had Garcia, youngsters, a right back, and he's had a lot of injury problems, and he's just hardly played, and he just looks out of his depth whenever he does play.
depth of
So
just
then,
need bodies.
yes. Let's talk about Palestra. So, who looks like he's going to turn down Inter Milan to go and join Chelsea. So he's a right wing back by trade. He is highly regarded. But talk me through this, James. You have Reece James, you have Gusto at right back already. Signing Palestra? Really? What? Unless you're having to sell either Gusto or James for financial reasons, which is actually, I mean, James isn't going to get sold having just signed that new contract. So it makes me wonder if Gusto's being lined up for a transfer somewhere, for the financial fair play or SCR reasons.
Or as Fabrizio Romano would say, here we go. He's basically confirmed the transfer for 50 million euros. Inter Milan can't afford that kind of thing. You can see that was a lowballing of Curtis Jones anyway, but not seen a lot of him. I have issues with Italian players coming into Premier League, just the way the Premier League is, kind of things. A lot of money. You could argue that Reece James ain't going anywhere. Club captain, 350 grand a week, whatever he's on, 6-year contract. So, I don't know now, but the one to look out for is Josh Ashingafon,
A
or
Chimpong,
however.
he's good.
He is.
He's good, and he's available. If you want to buy him, you can buy him, and it's a sort of player that I just wish Villa had a little bit more money in terms of, he is someone who, if he was your third choice centre back, I think you'd be pretty comfortable with it.
Can definitely see a couple of clubs making bids for him this summer. I'll be very surprised if he doesn't leave Chelsea. I know he's only 20, but he's highly regarded. He can play right back as well. He is a centre back, but he might be the one. He'll be looking out now and going, well, where am I going to play? Kind of thing. I'm not playing unless he plays the right side of a three under Alonso. But then how are you going to fit in? You say,
Honestly, right.
Palestri, where's Reece James going to play now? Is he going to play midfield, centre midfield with Caicedo?
So Chelsea have got problems. So in the same way Villa have. So Chelsea have got problems with the European settlement deal, where it looks like by the 30th of June, so we've got less than a week, they're going to have to sell some players. So obviously got rid of Cucurella. One of the problems they have is they don't have that many players they don't have many young players they can sell now for huge markups in the same way that they've had previously. So even when you Cucurella's the world, Cucurella obviously has been there for a few years. So when you look at the amortization of the deal, it's not as expensive for Chelsea as it was. And anyway, it's all quite complicated. But as a general rule, Chelsea are struggling to sell. They have to shift players potentially before June the 30th. And he is absolutely, given how many centre backs they have, who they will be struggling to shift. So someone like Tasazi, I could easily see go as well. He was actually quite reasonable for West Ham. They have a lot of centre backs, and I think a Chimpong will be an unfortunate sacrifice.
And he's homegrown, so it's pure profit. It'll be like what happened with Newcastle 2 years ago when they had to raise 60, 70 million pound by the 30th of June, and the Eddie Anderson, Minter, Gordon, Gomez kind of
Absolute,
merry-go-round.
James, some of that's absolute myth, right? We know Anderson right? Newcastle can say what they want, right? We know that they wanted Kilman from Wolves,
Yeah, yeah.
and they were willing to offer Anderson for him. Okay, let's not pretend that Newcastle was some distressed seller of Anderson. They had no idea how good Anderson was going to become. Honestly, I truly believe that.
That's why they
Minter,
only got 15 million quid for him.
Minter, completely different story. The 15 million pound thing was obviously some wild accounting with the
Yeah.
goalkeeper from Nottingham Forest, whose name I can't even pronounce, even remember, because shock horror, he's not a 25 million pound goalkeeper. Um, let let's just actually touch on Newcastle and Tonali. The story keeps rumbling on that whether it be Tottenham, Man City, other teams are linked with him. Not ideal if you're Newcastle.
Hard to replace. Knows the Premier League. Decent. Captain of AC Milan, a youngster as well. He's rock solid as well. And there's talk of, I mean, there's a lot of midfielders going. There's a lot of midfielders available. It's just who can they attract, kind of thing. And no,
Do you think a Wharton would go to Newcastle?
yes, I could see him going there, kind of thing. I could
Yeah,
see him going there.
I just
I
wondered
could
because
see him going
he
there
would
just
be
because
a.
I don't know what the cost. Apparently, excuse me, Palace want quite rightly. Elliot Anderson's 120. We want 100 million pound for him, and a couple Liverpool are not going to pay 100 million pound for Adam Wharton in any stretch of imagination, kind of thing. So yeah, I don't know, but he obviously wants to. The noise is he wants to move back up north, kind of thing. But Newcastle are a long, long way, I think, from getting back in the Champions League. So is it a sideways? It is a bigger club, obviously, Newcastle, but there's no European football next season. Maybe, I don't know. Anyway, look at the other midfielders. Like you've got Bergvall, he wants out at Tottenham, not
You
going to
you
play
said it.
there.
You said it about the Zerbi. Doesn't play the youngsters.
Yeah, doesn't play the youngsters. So Archie Gray will be another one there. Will be knocking on the door saying, "What's my game time coming up for the season?" And as soon as De Zerbi goes, well, looking to buy Tonali. Look, they also the noise around Mateus Fernandes from West Ham as well. I'm not sure West Ham would be delighted selling Kudos last summer and then selling Fernandes to their closest rivals this summer. So it looks like De Zerbi wants two new midfielders. So that's wonder why we know why Bergel wants out, Boval wants out, and probably Archie wants out. And then you've got Julian Alvarez, the big one, is a big transfer going on. Atletico Madrid, Argentinian striker. Real Madrid won't buy him, haven't got the cash to buy him, kind of thing.
What you
And
saying?
Barcelona just spent.
Are you saying the 150 million pound offer from Real Madrid wasn't genuine, James?
Think it was genuine. I don't think Real Madrid have 150 million euros or pounds in their bank account. So Atletico Madrid should have accepted the deal and gone then, show us the money. They don't have that money, Real Madrid.
So
The only
hold
teams
on,
that have that.
hold on. We just need to sell a training ground for
Yeah,
£3 billion.
exactly. He's a good player. There's only he doesn't. It looks like he left Man City because he didn't want to live in England. So he wants to go. I'm surprised that PSG haven't come in for him actually yet, or there hasn't been any noise.
I mean, I've said to you before. One of the problems Paris Saint-Germain have got at the moment is unless you're buying not a project player, but a slightly younger player, is where does Alvarez play in that starting lineup? Because I know Dembele doesn't stay fit, or has quite a few injury problems. But if you were looking at a starting lineup, you know, he's not starting ahead of, he's not starting out wide ahead of the two wide players. And so basically you're saying either he plays in behind Dembele or he plays instead of Dembele.
They could sell Barcola, couldn't they? And they get the 100 million for him, and then find 50 million. Have your four strikers and just rotate. Yeah, I think he's a brilliant player. He obviously wants out. He's getting his agent to speak to Romano on a daily basis, tweeting and whatever it is. That's the way football transfers works, isn't it? So yeah.
Um, okay, I think that's enough in terms of transfers. Do you want a quick chat about some other sports? We haven't really touched on other sports much in recent weeks. Obviously, I did a pod with John about the US Open, which Wyndham Clark won. A few a few nerves there at one point as he managed to blow a 6-shot lead, but he got the job done in the end. Um, we are at a time of year where ridiculous sporting calendar, all said and done. On was it? I'm losing track of days. Is it tomorrow? We have third test England New Zealand from what, Trent Bridge?
Yeah, just back to Wyndham Clark. Fair play to him. He was leading that tournament all tournament. That's hard work leading a golf tournament. It's hard work winning a golf tournament and being booed as an American on home soil. I know he's had his issues, especially last year when he went ballistic in the locker room and caused a load of damage to lockers that are 100 years old. Well, that's the way it's been reported anyway. To be booed on your home soil is
New
quite
York,
something, kind of
New
thing.
York sports fans for you, James. They are
I know,
ridiculous.
but it's been back to back big tournaments in Long Island, New York, with the Ryder Cup at Best Page, and now this. I know they're not hosting anything till I think it's for another 6, 7 years. The USPGA, I think, is going to Best Page, kind of thing, or the opener is. I can't remember either one. Anyway, it's getting to a stage where the golf authorities will not want this to be not a good look for them at all. Anyway, look, fair play, Wyndham Clark. And I've just seen that yesterday on the PGA Tour, they've announced a promotion and relegation starting 2028 season, I believe, or it is 2028 season, whereby 120 players are in the Premier League, essentially, the Premier Tournament. There's 23, 24 tournaments a season running from January to August. The top 90 keep their cards. It's $20 million prize money per tournament. The top 90 keep their cards. The other 30 go in to get relegated, essentially, to what is now the Corn Ferry Tour, something like that, whatever it's called at the moment. However,
Conferences.
if you win two of those tournaments, you automatically get in. There is, however, one big caveat to this: is the DP World Tour, because that wasn't mentioned at all yesterday. At the moment, if you're in the top 10 DP World Tour money list at the end of the season, you get a card for the PJ Tour for a year. There wasn't any mention of that at all yesterday in the press release that Tiger actually made an appearance, kind of thing, as head of player, whatever his job role there is now. So that's interesting for golf. The big one is, you and I have spoken about it offline, is cricket, and England, you say, play their third test match, 1-1 in the series against New Zealand from Trent Bridge. There's also going to be a very hot 3 or 4 days there. They've named their side England yesterday. They've gone back to essentially the Lord's test match side. Well, Archer's replacing Robinson, which I'm surprised that Robinson hasn't got back in the side. I didn't think Tongue had his greatest game at the Oval last week, although that was a shambles. But who knew when you make 5 changes, 3 debutants, and you have a load of kids playing, that you're going to get thumped by a very good New Zealand side. Their bowling is very useful. Overall, reminds me of Morne Morkel. Just, I know, height and whatever like that, awkward bounce. But I can't see how Stokes and McCullen and Key carry on. There's too much noise about them. And it's just, look, they're all extremely fortunate keeping their jobs after Australia. Ben Stokes knew there was a curfew. Let's be honest about it. Gus Atkinson knew there was a curfew. Ben Stokes put the curfew in. They've just gone out to protect Ben Stokes and Bounce McCullen and Rob Key, who are terrible at their jobs. Both of them are terrible at their jobs. Communication's key as management. We all know that, and they're garbage at it. He knew there was a thing. They've just gone around and said, look, you didn't get smacked, Stokes. And because it's not in the fine print and you weren't told explicitly there was no curfew after the end of the game, we'll just basically let you off, kind of thing. It
James,
doesn't
I
sit
mean,
well with me at all.
look, we've had many conversations offline about this, and we disagree quite strongly on this. In terms of, I was very much of the opinion that it just seemed a massive overreaction to, you know, the incident in terms of the nightclub, particularly when they weren't actually involved. There was no cricket the next day. And one of the things I said to you, and I really maintained, was for someone like Stokes, he is under so much pressure, and him going out, having a few beers with mates from Saracens or other rugby clubs, and you know, it's just not a big deal. And he needs certain. I think when you're under that much pressure, the ability to actually switch off a little bit is really important. And they've obviously had a great win in that first test, irrespective of what you think of the pitch and the amount of pressure he'd been under coming into that test match. And I just think that Key and McCullum have got this situation all so wrong in terms of the drinking culture and everything else. These are grown men, right? And you cannot dictate to them what they can and can't do when in a home test. If one thing when you're away in a home test series, I just find it incredible. Oh, you have to be home by 12 o'clock and all this nonsense. These are grown men making adult decisions. It doesn't affect their cricket, and you see the fallout from it. And I think what you see now is McCullum and Key. Their position just gets continually undermined, and they need to be put out of the misery because they aren't staying in those England jobs. And it'll be in the same way that people were desperate to jump all over Stokes as soon as he made the slightest mistake, from the media and fans and everyone else. It will be exactly the same for Key and McCullum. As soon as they make the slightest, any more mistakes, people will be all over them like a rash. Just the way things seem to be these days. But I'm surprised that if you were Rob Key, I know it's a job he'll never get again, but if he, he's a dead man walking. Honestly, he has absolutely no future in that job. He's massively out of his depth, and it's just literally a question of time until he goes. And then I see all the McCullum stuff yesterday with Stokes, where he says, "Oh, there's no issues." I can tell you now, there's issues between Stokes and McCullum. Like, do not believe what you're reading and what McCullum's saying. And just that in itself, the fact McCullum made comments about Stokes' mental health, and then the fact McCullum yesterday was saying there's no issues between us. There's you can tell that Stokes doesn't trust or respect McCullum.
Absolutely. Doesn't trust or respect Rob Key either, kind of thing. All the two CEOs, Richard Thompson, Richard Gould, who run England ECB cricket, where have they been heard in the last couple of weeks? Hiding behind their desks, out of public eye, getting paid an absolute fortune. What the hell is a cricket regulator, by the way? Who are these people on the board? What is Rob Key and Thompson and Gould doing then? Why
Give
do you
me
need
money. Give me money for
exactly?
doing
But
nothing.
exactly, why do you need someone else, an independent person? Hang on, mate. You pay Ben Stokes and Gus Atkinson, whoever it is, an awful lot of money. If you can't make those decisions within 24, 48, 72 hours, whatever it is, get all the facts. Why do you need another company and other more people to come in? Ben Stokes must have gone to that interview as a cricket regulator and gone, excuse me, but what are you doing here? You've got absolutely nothing to do with England cricket kind of thing. You have no idea what went on in Australia, what went on in the nightclub kind of thing. Look, there was a curfew in place. He shouldn't have been there. He knows he's made a massive
James,
mistake.
I've had this conversation with you. The fact there was a curfew there in the first place is everything that is wrong. Honestly, if you have a curfew when you're in the middle of a test match, fine. Once a test match finishes at home, if you get into trouble because you're fighting and you're doing other stuff, fine, right? You're representing the country. If you're just having a few quiet beers with friends, yes, obviously the Saracens lad has got a bit leery, okay, but it's an absolute non-story, and it's been blown up massively out of proportion. And just the very fact there's a curfew on them in that situation shows you how flawed the management's thinking is of that England team.
Think that the curfew's only been put in place to keep Stokes, McCullum, and Key in a job. Then
Possibly, I don't dispute that. But what I think is telling, by the way, is the fact that Stokes is back for the third test, and that actually what ended up happening wasn't nearly as bad, or there was a lot more. There's a bit more to it, I think, than what we're being told. Because
absolutely.
as I say, the fact he's back captain for the third test after everything that went on and all the talk about how he might not ever play for England again and he might retire.
Close, by the way. I think it was pretty close because he was annoyed, obviously, because the book incident, well, he covered it up for 6 months and then let him play and Bessel play. Look, he's back tomorrow. Can we just take one appreciation, by the way? Joe Root has to be the worst captain of any sport at international level I've ever seen. I mean, I know he had 3 debutants and he had no control, but him on the first evening when he asked Jofra Archer to bowl 8 overs on the trot, bowling bouncers to Glenn Phillips on a flat deck.
Deja
And
vu,
then,
James. Hmm?
and exactly, who knew? And then not bowling him for 100 minutes on day 2 and giving Jacob Bessel, who's a part-timer at best, the new ball ahead of Jofra Archer. Absolutely abhorrent captaincy. One of the worst I thought Alistair Cook was bad. Joe Root is one of the worst captains of any sport I've ever seen at that level. Terrible.
It was almost so bad that he was deliberately doing such a bad job because he knows he doesn't want to do it anymore. Like, let's see how badly I can do this job. Congratulations, Joe. You've succeeded. Ben Stokes is back.
I just don't understand. Like, how can you get it? I know you talk about pressure and things like that. And also, Sonny Baker, look, he's a young kid, and people are going to be like, oh, he runs around, he's all this business. He's bowling from 22, 23 yards away. His front foot is nowhere near the front popping crease. What is it on earth he's been coached at Hampshire for? What are the England cricket team looking at him going, oh yeah, he'll succeed at international level? There's no wonder last season, the ODI and the T20, he got absolutely carted around the place. He's not ready. He's not ready for first-class cricket, let alone international cricket. It was just absolutely ridiculous. I mean, the start of play on the Sunday, New Zealand were 1.22, 5-1 on. It should have been 1,000-1 on to win that game. And by the way, they'll take great confidence out and they'll be thinking, we can win. Their team settled, even without Williamson playing. They've got players in form, and that bowling unit is very, very useful. And they can put pressure on. Bethel hasn't scored a run. Looks like a baby with nappies on at the moment, batting at 3. Who knew he hasn't played any first-class cricket? Emilio Gray, look good. But anyway, look, it'll be an interesting test match because careers are on the line for McCullen and Key. Anyway, moving on to other sports.
Oh,
That was off my...
just quickly, a couple of
Oh,
things
yeah,
on
go on.
cricket. One is who who on earth thought hosting the Women's World Cup would be a good idea during the Football World Cup? I mean, honestly, absolutely insanity. You're getting you're getting the attention you deserve when you plan such things. It's been completely lost. But you know, you make decisions like that. That's what happens.
The only way they could have done it, they had to do it before the Men's Football World Cup, because as soon as the Men's Football World Cup finishes, the 100 starts that England have put in exponential amount of money. But yeah, I agree with you. It had to be before the Football World Cup. Can't do it now when no one's talking about it.
And then, I mean, we've talked about this lad before, but Sooryavanshi, or however you pronounce his name. I mean, I'm going to go out on a limb here, James. I mean, he obviously earlier in the week against Sri Lanka A team, I think it was 94 off 29 balls.
So
Um,
11 ball 50.
he, I mean, we talk about generational players. Okay, I'm struggling to think of any sportsman I've ever known in any sport who is as dominant at his age as he is. I mean, his talent levels. So it's not just a case of being, like Tendulkar came on the scene at a very young age and being good and everything. He's smashing the bowling absolutely everywhere. These are highly skilled professional male cricketers of the highest order, and he is carting them absolutely everywhere. He's 15.
The only sport you can not compare it with, but at that young age, is swimming. Was Phelps and Ian Thorpe kind of thing when they were dominating at 15, 16. I know it's a very different sport, but when you have generational talents who are that young, Ian Thorpe at whatever is winning gold medals kind of thing, and Michael Phelps, obviously. So, but yeah, he had 50 off 11 balls. So Ireland play India actually in a T20 this Friday and this Sunday in Belfast, and I think he's back. I think he will be in the. Well, I'm pretty sure he's been picked, hasn't he, for it?
Honestly, if you haven't seen him, we touched on him months and months ago, and it's quite nice when you do that. Absolute superstar, very, very special talent.
Yep.
Um, any other sports,
England play
James?
India, sorry, next week, starting next week in a 5-1, 5 20 matches, T20, starting on Wednesday, the 1st of July. So you'll be able to watch them then. But yeah, even if you don't like cricket, just the way you whacks it first ball, there's no playing yourself in and seeing the pitch. It's just see ball, hit ball. And normally it's 150 yards that way.
Any other sports? Obviously, as I say, this time of year, we obviously have Wimbledon starting, I think, next week. We have it's incredible sort of sport coming up. We had Royal Ascot last week. I see, James, that horse racing continues to embarrass itself. Um, the farcical situations with a horse called Bacchio, who weighed in light and got away with it. I mean, following on from the Derby and Benvenuto Cellini and being a non-runner after getting foot in the stool on the side of the stalls. And honestly, I've never seen a sport make so many poor decisions as horse racing does. It is a sport that's absolutely finished, and it's not just for these decisions, but I mean it's just hastening the speed at which its demise.
Yeah, then you had the incident at Yarmouth where they didn't call non-runner as well, and it was a worse incident. The only good thing coming out of Royal Ascot was Adrian Bryan had 100 winners at Royal Ascot, but then he had his own issues in the big race on Tuesday when Gustard and his pacemaker and Christophe Soumillon got an 8-day ban. Quite rightly got an 8-day ban because it was cleared a form of cheating. They couldn't find anything. She was, yeah, it's got. The problem is the top of the people at horse racing are just inept. Let's just call them out. They're inept kind of thing. They make decisions that are just don't make any sense. Like that horse on Saturday, if that's anywhere else, if that's today at Nace or that's today at Carlisle or wherever the racing, I think there's been cancellations today in racing because of heat here in the UK, that horse gets disqualified. Absolutely no doubt about it. It's not even a discussion, and they'll get fined and jockey probably gets banned. You can't have one rule for one and one rule for the other. It's an absolute Mickey Mouse.
So that would be the word. It's just Mickey Mouse. I mean, and it's a shame, right? Because we went to Royal Ascot last year. I go to Cheltenham every year. We go to other horse racing. Been to Windsor, maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago. It's a good day out, and there's a lot to like about it. But it is a sport that's desperately struggling.
Yeah, I'll be going to the French racing this summer as well when I'm abroad there. Kind of thing, go and watch it. It's just a good day out, things like that. Yeah. Anyway, off horse racing. There was a bit of rugby at the weekend. Leinster won the URC final against the Stormers on Friday night in a half-empty Crow Park. They just haven't taken to Leinster this season. Leo Cullen's leaving at the end of next season, which seems absolutely ridiculous. And then Northampton Saints beat Exeter on Saturday afternoon. The Shoe Army won,
No one's
and
no one's interested in that rubbish, James.
82,000 people were at Twickenham on Saturday, I'll have you know. And what's coming up is the Summer Internationals, but they've changed this year. So there are now called a championship, the Nations Championship. So instead of going to one country, you go all over the place. So, for example, England travel to South Africa, then they come home to play Fiji, and then they go to Argentina. So every team will play 3 games, and then the other 3 games will be in October, November here in the Northern Hemisphere. And then there'll be the top 2 teams will play in a final at Twickenham in mid-November. So yeah, so something to look forward to on Saturday. More Saturdays for any rugby fans out there. But apart from that, yeah, Wimbledon started, you said, on. You got the doping incident. The former champion lady got banned for 4 years for not allowing a drug test to come into her house. In the midweek, she got a 4-year ban. I don't really have much sympathy for her, really. What are you hiding? So that starts on Monday, I believe, isn't it? This
I
Monday
think so. Yeah,
coming.
they've got qualifiers this week.
And
And then
Serena Williams is back, sorry. She has got a wild card into singles. Sorry, that is the big news as well from women's tennis. Serena Williams is back. I wonder what actually price she is to win the tournament. I mean, that would be quite remarkable. 44-year-old hasn't played for, sorry, excuse me, hasn't played for X amount of years.
I mean, that would be a shocking indictment on the women's tennis game. I mean, that's the sort of thing which I mean, people might say, "Oh, that would be a fairy tale story," and all that sort of stuff. That would be on Betfair. She's difficult to know. The market's not particularly liquid. It's between 50 and 190. But that
Yeah,
puts
just checking.
a that put her into sort of maybe 20th in the betting, something like that.
Oh, yeah, just checking now on odds checker kind of thing. But yeah, I mean that is remarkable. She's obviously playing doubles with Venus as well. So yeah, because the men's obviously no Alcaraz. It's going to be Yannick Sinner. Can he get over his disappointment of the French Open? But he should be winning that. It should be a non-event really. Um, yeah, it's always on, but there's other sports to watch next week. Kind of thing. Yeah,
And lots and lots of football. So I think we'll do next pod will be after next England game. And yeah, so have a good week. Enjoy the football. Enjoy the cricket. Enjoy all the sport.
absolutely. And try and cool down here in London. Have a good day, all. Bye bye.